It's time for Coffee on the Coast Book Banter. Good afternoon and welcome to Coffee on the Coast. I'm your host this afternoon, Tina Prigge. Welcome back to Coffee on the Coast, Therese Horstketter from Manitowoc Public Library for another episode of Book Banter. Therese, so nice to see you.
Hi, good to be here again.
And I have to say, I feel like we're fortunate that we got to meet today because there is a storm in progress, a snowstorm right now. So we weren't even sure if we'd be able to connect today, but I'm really glad to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Glad it worked out.
And if you're watching this episode of Coffee on the Coast Book Banter, you might want to warm up with coffee, maybe even some hot chocolate today. Therese, you and I were talking about when a storm is coming, the grocery stores are full, and the library also gets busy because people are grabbing books so that they have something good to snuggle up with.
Yep, can't be without.
So you've got some recommendations for us today, and with the storm, all around us, it's the perfect thing to do is to have a good book, a good read. So let's start with, you said you've got an old favorite, The Alibi Man by Tammy Hogue. Tell us what
Yes.
this is.
Well, this is something I read quite a while ago. It just is in my list of things that I keep, and it is actually from 2007. So I can't give a lot of details at this point. It's one of those books, though, that when you see the title, it just kind of stays with you. You knew you really liked it. It is basically about a group of rich men in a different variety of ways in society that can pull off some really horrific crimes, including murder, and they become the alibi man for each other. So it's this woman that is a detective used to kind of be in this circle of people, and she is not anymore now that she's a detective. And not that she ever did these things, but she was aware of these people and kind of included in their circle in some points. And her ex is involved in the story. And it was it's just one of those good books. Tammy Hogue, I have read probably a couple of others, but this one was a standout for me that I really liked.
Interesting. And so, you mentioned murder. Does that mean there's a bit of mystery happening here?
Definitely. Something to solve with her being the detective and trying to prove that these guys are really just setting up alibis and lying for each other. But they managed to cover it really well with, I don't know if I want to say powers, but, the abilities they have in the positions they have. So
Right.
yeah, I just thought it was a really different one. I always remember this title, and I didn't have as much time to be, in with new things lately. So this was really a nice one to offer.
Okay, got it. The Alibi Man by Tammy Hogue. Okay, now that seems like a completely different book than this next one, The Virgin of Small Plains by Nancy Picard. Tell us about this.
This one traveled around for a while among people after a couple of us read it and really enjoyed it. And I haven't read a lot of her other books, and she has quite a few. And this looks like kind of a nice, calm cover, except for all the blood spatter all over it.
Blood.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
I just
so,
noticed that.
yeah, yeah, you're looking at wheat and the pretty sky, and then there's all of that. So, a teenager was found dead and frozen in winter. No one knew who she was, where she came from. And I'm trying to think, it says she showed up. So for 17 years, she's been in this community's cemetery. And she became somewhat of a, um, she became well known as people would go there and they would stop at her grave, and somehow either prayers involving her, something, these miraculous little things would happen. But nobody still knew who she was. Is it a coincidence that things would happen after they stopped, and made this visit with her? But then it comes back to some people coming back into town. And one of the things I do remember especially is that involved um, the judge, the doctor. It's small towns, so you don't have too many people in all those same positions. But somehow those families were all involved as it winds its way down, that they were all involved somehow with this girl being there.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Therese, I love it when you give us insight into books like this, right? Like when I saw the cover, first of all, I didn't even notice the blood spatter, but I saw the cover and then I saw the title and I was like, hmm. But then when I hear you describe it, I'm like, oh, interesting. I really want to add that to my read list.
It is really an old favorite of mine that I just keep on a list, and I keep checking to make sure we're not withdrawing the copies. It's kind of nice to see, yes, it's still in the library, and yeah.
Nice. All right, cool. And you said Nancy Picard has written other things. This isn't her only.
She has. The Scent of Rain and Lightning is one by her that people might be aware of. That was made into a movie, and I can't think of other titles, but I know she has a good handful.
Oh, very nice. Okay, a
Mhm.
tried and true author. Got
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Cool. All right, let's move on. What is The Couple Next Door by Sherry LaPena? It says it all started at a dinner party. The twists come as fast as you can turn the pages. Tell us more.
It does. So this is something that when I started it is, I immediately have this feeling of I would never do this. But it was a couple who, there's another couple that are somewhat near an age to them that live next door. And they invited them over and they were going to have a babysitter. The babysitter had to call and say, can't make it. So they figured, she's going to be asleep anyway. We'll just leave the baby at home and we'll go next door. So that is the first part that I could never do. I mean, yeah. And they're first time parents. It's not like they have 10 children there. They have one child there. And they said, okay, we'll just take turns going to check on her. And they had, the whatchamacallit, so you can listen to the baby. I can't think of the word for it at the
Oh,
moment.
some kind of
It's just
monitor,
the
right?
monitor. So they figure, okay, we're covered. We'll run over. We'll, take turns. So they were doing that. And when they went back at we'll say about 12:30 it was, the front door was open and the baby was gone.
No.
And so that's where we go with the story. It kind of starts there because at that point, who did it? Were the parents involved? The detective is going through every possibility because, did the parents somehow hurt the baby and tried to do something to cover it up? Did
Oh.
somebody break in? Is maybe one of the parent, it's just all the things that you would think of just reading, and it's going through the detective's head. And then it turns out that the neighbors have their own kind of secret, and so they have a little insight, but they're not going to share because of their secret. And it just kind of goes like that. You have the little twists along the way here, and without giving too much away, but it does really keeps you moving and wondering. And at some points you get a little definite insight into what's happening. But yeah, and so was a good book. Yeah.
Oh, I'm a little bit on
nice,
pins and needles
yeah,
here, Therese.
a nice mystery, even though, you're going to find out along the way, but then there's extra little twists along the way too. So yeah, it was a good one.
Can you at least tell us, like, when you get to the end, is the baby okay?
Baby's okay.
Okay, all right, all right. Sarah Kate commented that she loved The Couple Next Door, so there's another recommendation for that book.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
really excited to check
we
that
want
one
to
out.
do that. We want to take that away from,
Yeah. Nice. Okay, so that was book number 3. Tell us about How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix.
Okay, we talked about one of his books before, the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, and that was a favorite probably year and a half, 2 years ago, somewhere in there. And this one is it has to do with a couple passes away, and their adult children have to come to the home to sell it. And what happens is it involved right away, since I knew it was going to be not your mainstream fiction, but that it had dolls and puppets in the house. And so, they're usually creepy in any kind of a, you know, yeah. And the only thing it needed was a clown. Yeah, that was, with a balloon. And anyway, so yeah, there are right away the foreboding feelings. And then the brother is the younger of the two. It's a sister and brother that have to get together and take care of this home. And um, so they do not like each other. They did not grow up well together. And she went a totally different way. She has a family. She is at the point of an ex and her daughter who are together with his family while she comes back here, and which is quite a distance away. And so she's staying there and intends it's going to be a few days, it'll be done. And yeah, well, just mentioning the dolls and the puppets and haunted house, so it ends up, I shouldn't say it ends up, but of course there are the things that are going to happen with those creatures. And I thought one of my favorite things about the book was that there were two adults, and I could put myself absolutely right there on the spot, that at more than one point they did not want to go back in the house. And these are adults that I could just feel it. He really put you in the place of, yep, these supposedly inanimate objects are causing absolute terror for them. And yeah, it was good. And then they have other people, of course, that they are dealing with. It's they have these southern ladies in the family. I shouldn't say kind of, southern ladies in the family, and I don't remember what state they grew up in, but so they come in, and one is a realtor and actually says, your house is haunted. We've had to do this before and get rid of hauntings. So, there are other people that are kind of in and out of the story. It would have been kind of fun if they had had even more in it, I think, but he stayed mostly with the brother and sister. And yeah, it was a pretty good book. Mhm.
Interesting. So, do they suspect that the creepy dolls and the puppets had anything to do with the parents' death?
Um, there's I'm making gestures with my hands, which you can't see. There is that possibility. And so, yeah, it's,
Okay.
I just, there were some really good parts in this. And like I said, you can feel it. How, you don't want to think as an adult that certain things can probably scare you, but this really brought it right out there. Hmm.
Would you say, is this a book not to read before bed?
Um, there might be little parts of it, not overall, because they bring in so much often enough. It's broken up by the relationship between these two, trying to, even though they're admitting how much they didn't like each other, but they're also figuring out some things from their childhood that may have had to do with the puppets and dolls.
Were the puppets and
So,
dolls there during their childhood? Like, did they grow up
yes.
in this house? Okay.
Hmm. Their mother was very involved with them and with groups of people who like to put on shows and stuff, and they had their groups to belong to like that. And yeah, so They've kind of
Interesting.
been there all along.
So you had recommended a couple of Book Banter episodes ago. You talked about Fairy Tale by Stephen King, which I
Yes.
did listen to. Very good book.
Okay.
And I was listening to the audiobook and I was listening to it before bed and
Oh,
Stephen King and it started I was like, I think I need to turn this off right now. I didn't know what was going to come next, but I was like, I get the feeling that this is going
hmm
down a not good to listen to before bed kind of place. And then
yeah.
I laughed at myself because the next day when I picked it up again, it wasn't at all what I had, he had
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
led you to believe something scary was going to happen. And then it didn't really. And
Yeah.
so that was a great recommendation, by the way, Therese. I enjoyed that book.
The worst one that I had, that Stephen King, when I was sitting in bed and reading. This was back, before I was had my own place or anything. And so I'm in a twin bed. My sister's in the next bed, and I'm reading the Stephen King opening to a book. And he's just talking about, books that really make you scared. And you're sitting in your bed and reading it, and you're looking at how far away that door is. And can you get out and get to that door before the thing under your bed grabs you? Yeah, that Stephen King can be a little mean sometimes.
But so you're saying that the How to Sell a Haunted House doesn't really fall
It
into
it
that
doesn't
category.
quite do that. It has some really good chilling moments, but it's not overall horror the whole time.
Nice.
Yep.
Viewers, you'll have to let us know. Are there any books that you've read that you would recommend not reading right before bed? That's kind of
Yeah.
an interesting category.
People will
Okay.
only read in their living room now with lots of lights on.
And even then, if it's Stephen King, it can sometimes get to you.
Yes, he does.
Okay, so this book, I Hate Everyone Except You by Clinton Kelly. It's a book that has me doubled over laughing and trying to catch my breath, says Jane Lynch. I think I started listening to this one this morning while I was doing my work, and it's completely different from the last one you were just talking about. Tell us about
hmm
I Hate Everyone Except You.
So if people are familiar with Clinton Kelly, you would probably remember him from What Not to Wear. And I know he's been on the show The Chew, which I've really never watched, but he he was a fashion, I won't say expert, but he would guide women with how they should dress, how to maybe update. And um, with the show that he was on, you would have somebody would suggest somebody that needs a makeover. And he, along with his partner on the show, would go through this and help someone redo all of this. Well, he talks about her somewhat in this book. This book actually is, I don't call it short stories, it's more like jumping around with blurbs from his life. So it starts out when he's 12 and he goes to an amusement park, and he's hoping to see all these, cool looking kids, and he's going to try and be one of them. And it is not like that at all. And actually, it's a dangerous place, which is a real place that existed years ago. And I actually read an entire book on the place. It's called Action Park. And anyway, it was kind of terrifying. It was not built safely, and a lot of people were injured at it. But this is how he starts the book, talking about his day with his family there. And then he goes on to say the next one might be about how he's married now. His husband is doing this and that. And so it's a whole nother thing that he's discussing. Then it'll jump back to a good friend of his, this girl that he stayed good friends with, like from high school on, or even maybe grade school. They just have stayed best good friends, like drop of a hat. They will be there for each other and enjoy their time together. And the one thing with him, there's always a lot of language. It is just a part of his nature. And his friends are pretty much um, tend to be the same way as him. But so you might want to brace yourself a little bit. It is pretty much throughout the book, but there are just such funny stories with him. And at some point, he will talk about wanting to get even at people sometimes for the horrid way they treat people. There is a reoccurring theme of that, being a gay man, being a married gay man, and just with what he did in public, trying to help people, like it says, with a total makeover. And he finally, at some point in here, at one of the last stories, he said he drops that from his life about bad things that happened. I just want to set them aside and be happy. And he delivers a speech at the end for, as a favor to someone, a high school graduation speech. And it is basically, and this isn't giving anything away in a book like this, but to say you want to find things that make you happy, not that make other people happy, that, and don't let other people ruin your life with that. You have to learn to set it aside, keep going and doing what is best for you and the people that you love. And it's just, I think I always liked him. My favorite word about him is snarky, because that's the way I always think of him. And the printout that I had here, just, to kind of make notes and stuff, and it lists snarky is in one of the first sentences, but that's how I see him. He is, I guess people might think of insulting in a way, but it seems more of, it's not like he's going up to people and saying this to hurt their feelings. It's more the way he's thinking of things and how he can work on it, I guess, with his life and with helping other people. And he is close to his family. He, it talks about him throwing his sister around in the yard, trying to help her be a cheerleader at some point. And that the mother would be, "What are you doing?" And he said, "She's going to be a cheerleader." And he's throwing her up in the air, and, that kind of thing. And that he always seemed to be, no matter what. And there is a nice little afterword to his grandmother, who you never hear mentioned in the book. So you have to make sure to read that if you look at the book. A nice little note for her.
Oh, okay. So I started listening to this one today, and it's delightful, right? And
Yep.
Would you describe the language as colorful as the bird on the cover?
Yep. And more, if you could throw more colors there.
Yeah,
But,
more colors,
you just, and he's not one who, he definitely doesn't seem to do it out of, wanting to, bring a little attention to anything. It just is what it is. And I just know some people have a harder time reading something if there is more language in it. But I just still have to really say I love this. It just was so fun to read. And it's an older book too. It's like 2017. It's not a brand new book by him.
So Clinton Kelly, is he a real person, like in the world? Like, so the show that he's talking about, The Chew, for example, did that really exist?
Right.
So
these are all real things. The What Not to Wear show, that's where I was first aware of him. And he actually has, I had to write it down, he has another book that may be a little, I'm not sure age-wise where it fits, but it's called Freakin' Fabulous. And it's how to do everything. And it is how to dress, speak, behave, eat, drink, entertain, decorate, and generally be better than everyone. And it just tells you, okay, you're going out to eat. This is something you should know. If you order this, you're going to need to do this when you eat. Or, how do you go to, what do you wear if this is suggested for, casual, whatever. And so he'll have pictures of people and say, this is casual, this is too casual, this is, and it's just fun. And he's not mean. I do not take it as mean. I just find him as funny, interesting, and definitely, I learned things from his books too. So
Yeah, yeah, it's a delightful, like, glimpse into a life, he's living in New York,
Hmm.
fashion magazine editor on these it's a
Right,
whole glimpse into a life that, we're not living here, which is always fascinating, and
right.
now that I know it's somewhat autobiographical, that kinda
Definitely.
changes, like,
That,
I have a deeper
yep,
appreciation for it.
yep. That is definitely, and I loved, there was the part when he talked about when he met his stepfather, and Mike, and he described him as showing up at their door, and he was wearing like mostly leather, I think, and gold chains, and I don't remember if it said something about his hair, and he said, I wouldn't have been any more surprised if like a 6-foot carp was standing in the door. He just didn't seem like quite the impression or quite the thought that he had of who his mother's new boyfriend was going to be. And he ended up to be a stepdad. And it sounds like they had a very nice relationship, or that they still have. But yeah,
Yeah.
so it's just funny. He just has a good way with descriptions, and yeah, just describing situations. He's a good writer, I think.
Yeah,
That
I
you
think
really
so
get
too.
a full picture of everything.
And, it's interesting because so I'm listening to the audiobook of it, and it's actually read by Clinton Kelly. So
Oh,
it's just really
yeah,
flavorful, and now that I know it's his voice really about his life, I'm
right,
fascinated.
right. I thought it was good. I would recommend it to just about anyone, and you just have to have a nice sense of humor with him and some of
Right.
the situations.
Yeah. Yeah, appreciate it for who he is and the stories he's sharing. Therese,
Yeah.
I really love the diversified recommendations that you share with us on the show. And I just want to follow up because recently on a show, you had recommended this book, Blood Sugar
Hmm.
by
Right.
Sasha Rothschild. So I immediately put it on my hold list. And it's, this is a story where she's accused of 4 murders, only guilty of 3. I
Yeah.
wasn't sure, how excited I was to listen to the book, but when I got it, it grips you right away, and it was really an enjoyable read.
Yeah, it
And
was.
the plot was so fresh. I just, so
But I
thank
just
you
love
for
when
that.
you start out with that line on the cover. Yes. That
Yeah.
was a good draw for me too.
Yeah. I couldn't figure out how they would resolve that, right? Like I
Yeah.
didn't have any predisposed expectations of how the story was going to go, and I was not disappointed. It was really
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And I just want to point out too, so many of your recommendations are great, Therese, the ones that I've had a chance to read. But I just finished Now Is Not the Time to Panic by Kevin Wilson.
Mhm.
Um, you'd also previously recommended Nothing to See Here, which was great. And this one, I can't stop thinking about it. Again, the
Yeah.
plot was just so fresh and unique
Mhm.
and well written.
Yep, he is another author, I think, to keep watching, and I think he has previous books that I've never read. The one,
Oh,
the cover was so eye-catching with, N Nothing to See Here, with the children that,
on fire.
yeah. And anyway, so that one was good, and yeah. So I think he's a good author to keep in mind too, overall.
Yeah, I just really want to reiterate how much I appreciate the recommendations because a lot of these books I they were zero awareness of until you mentioned them, and some
Well,
of them I've just really enjoyed.
yep, and there's just so many out there. It's
Yeah.
amazing. I said if all the authors would take a year off, I would never get caught up. It was just, yeah, yeah. There's just
Yeah.
too many good ones out there.
So viewers, we want to know what you think. Have you read any of the books that have been recommended on Book Banter? If so, tell us what you think. Have you read others by some of the same authors that you would recommend? Have you read books that we haven't talked about that you would recommend? We'd love to know those recommendations too. As two voracious readers, I think we would
Totally.
take any recommendations you have.
Yeah.
Therese, as always, this has been so enjoyable, and I cannot think of a better day to be talking book banter with the snow
Yep.
falling all around.
Yeah. A wonderful day, and a wonderful day to grab your book, which I'm hoping to do tonight when I get home, and
No.
get into a good book. I have a whole stack that are going home with me again. I bring a few back and I take more home. So,
Do you
always.
ever start a book and feel unsatisfied with it? Like, are there books that you don't finish?
Oh, plenty. Mostly because I have too many at one time. I have a lot of holds that come up. And then I will actually get to the point sometimes that, I'll read the first 10 pages or so. And if there's not something that catches me pretty quick, that one may go back because, you just have to. Some just don't click right away. And especially if you've read a certain kind, say you read mysteries and you would like it to keep going. You'd like another mystery with that kind of tenseness to it, and another kind of book might not do it for you. But at another time, if you go back to that, because people are still saying, "Oh, I loved it. Didn't you like it? Give it another try," and you might. But
It is true at different points in life, picking up a book a second time, you have a different take on it. But it is nice to know that it's librarian approved, that if a book doesn't click with you, it's okay. Life's too short. You don't have
yep,
to suffer through.
that's just it too. Sometimes you just have to say, "I'm sorry." You're going back on the shelf.
By the way, Sarah Kate said, I have not been disappointed by any Sherry LaPenna books. She writes so well, and they're all page turners. Good to know. Thank you, Sarah. And, we were talking too before we went live about audiobooks. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks because then I can
Mhm.
multitask. And there have been a couple of times where the performer of the audiobook, it just didn't click with me. Maybe it was something about like the voice tone or just the delivery. I have stopped listening to a couple of books if it didn't click that way.
Right? And we all know how much we have the people in our head, the way they're talking, and what you would expect if you met this person in a book that, if all of a sudden the characters were there in front of you, it's like, well, it's either I didn't expect that or that's just how he should look. Yeah,
Yeah. Sometimes that happens with a movie adaptation, right? Like, huh, that's
right.
an
Yeah.
interesting take on
Oh,
that
yeah.
character.
There have been some good things they've done along the way, and then there have been some, oh, that person shouldn't have been in that movie or shouldn't have played that part. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Oh, Therese, thank you so much for taking time on this snowy day to have
Oh,
an episode of Book Banter with us. Thank you for the great recommendations. Looking forward to digging in and already looking forward to next time.
yep. Me too.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for watching this episode of Coffee on the Coast, Book Banter. We'll see you next time.